Okay, everybody, we are live and underway. It is now 1 o'clock, so welcome along to the Strategy and Planning Committee for today, 10th Feb. We have 3 papers today, and we have one apology, which could be for lateness. We're unsure whether or not Councillor Kate Wilson will manage to make it for some of the meeting. Possibly. So somebody care to move that?
Move accepting her apology.
Sure. Councillor Calvert, seconded Councillor Hope, all in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. No public forum today that I'm aware of. We can confirm the agenda for today. No changes. Any conflicts of interest that anyone wants to declare at this point? No. We have confirmation of the minutes of the 1st of December meeting as a true and accurate record. Somebody care to move that? Councillor?
No, sorry, I won't, because actually I wasn't there.
Oh, okay,
sorry, I won't.
Sure.
That's all
Thank you. Councillor Noon, seconded Councillor Deaker, all in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. The action register is there, and yeah, there is one there that's noted as overdue. And Councillor Scott, did you just want to make a brief comment on that?
Yeah, I feel like the schoolboy that's been called out. But I did, prior to this meeting, email around an email that was put out late November. And I can refer to that, Madam Chair, where the group had actually had, that you're referring to, the working group, it actually had a series of meetings and came up with a couple of outcomes. Firstly, that no funding is sought, and that a recommendation that particular working group be put on hold. And secondly, we supported the ORC signing a non-binding MOU with the Southern Alliance to seek and release government funding. And we understood that there was no automatic obligation for local funding. And we came up with something like 6 reasons why we'd come to that conclusion. I can refer to them if you wish.
I think it just needs to be considered whether it's appropriate to come through a committee or not, but you've given us an update anyway at that
and in writing by email.
Yes, that's right.
Whether staff were of a mind to formalise that or whether it's sufficiently formalised, I'm not sure.
So you'll remember that we did, excuse me, bring to Council the paper that had the decision tree, which was around devising a process that would look at whether we funded something or not.
Oh, that's right, yes.
So I think we have actually covered this off.
Yeah.
Cool.
We can tick that as a completed then.
Good. I think it was the purple colour that threw me a bit.
Thank you.
If it's purple.
Thank you, Councillor Noon.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just the last item on that list of the action register. I have spoken to Mayor Hawkins about collaboration with the DCC, and yes, there will be a meeting that will happen at some point in the future, but I haven't got a date yet.
Is this about the transport?
This is South Dunedin adaptation mitigation measures. Yeah.
Thank you for that update. Any other comments on that action register? No? Okay. Okay. There is a presentation here, Land and Water Regional Plan. Is that right? No.
Yep. It's just a brief update, Madam Chair, and Anita, I know she's online there somewhere. She may want to jump in, but just to give the committee an update with regards to the Land and Water Regional Plan Governance Group. We're continuing to meet monthly. For this year, our first meeting's on the 22nd of February. So we look forward to that first gathering for 2021. The Menihira Kia scenarios being worked to then discuss and consult with the community, and that once again these are dates that's occurring on the 30th and 31st when they have community meetings of March. So 30 and 31st, and I understand invites have been sent out to councillors. The reviews of the existing water plan for Otago and waste plan for Otago are both being planned to be completed by the end of March. And then the last point there, the Arrow and Cadrona Rohi have been worked on for some time and will be completed with feedback at community meetings in Arrowtown and Wanaka. And those dates are the 17th and 18th of March. And once again, everyone has been circulated with those meeting days and times.
Okay, thank you for the update. Are there any questions on that presentation? Okay.
I feel a bit bad because I can't make some of those ones up in Arrowtown.
Yeah. Well, you can only do what you can do in terms of your calendar, and as long as we can have, one or two councillors, and I understand at least two can make those Arrow and Cadrona ones. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have the three papers today. The first one is the RPS panel recommendation process. So Anita, I think you authored this one, and Gwyneth, we've got you as well coming up. This is, quite a simple paper at this stage. The actual process of appointing the specific commissioners or making recommendations to will come further down the track, but to ensure appropriate processes followed, if a councillor was put forward or two councillors, however many, then we would need to be aware of that for any process further down the track. So just at this point, the RPS would be considered a freshwater planning instrument, is our understanding. I personally don't think it would be appropriate to put my name forward as a commissioner. But yeah, today's a chance to discuss that. Councillor Scott, I'll just see if we've got any comments from Gwyneth.
Well, excuse me, Madam Chair. As one of the five that are actually referred to in this paper being qualified, I'm of a mind to step aside in terms of potential conflict of interest.
Okay, Councillor Scott, yep. Because
I'd hate it to ever be perceived that I voted in a particular way because I wanted a particular outcome and
yes. You're very welcome at any stage, any of you, to remove yourself for any reason. So thank you for that. Yep.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, I've already declared that I would not be seeking nomination. Yep. You've decided to stand back from the meeting as well, Councillor Kelleher. You've withdrawn your chair. Anyone else choose to do that?
Madam Chair, I've got a similar view to you, but I'll speak to it in a moment.
Sure.
That's okay.
Yep. Any comments from the staff regarding the paper?
I think Councillor Robinson, you summarised it really well. It is quite a simple paper. The reason we need to get it started now is because commissioners get really difficult to secure. So we need to make sure we've got enough time to have the best available pool of people that might be available to be put forward.
Yeah. I'll just note as well that I did speak to Councillor Wilson, and she was not of a mind to put herself forward, but I guess that's not a formal thing as she's not here, but she did comment on the phone. That was her thinking. Councillor Noon, followed by Councillor Laws.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I want to just frame comments, some comments generally, and then just some relating to my own personal situation. But generally speaking, my view is that the RPS has been, I suppose, worked up to the level it is now in draft form. Worked up in a sense. I don't mean to suggest any anger involved, but it's been developed to the level it is at now. And as elected members, we've partaken in workshops, reference groups, etc. And direct feedback as well to staff. So that's sort of my general comment. These sorts of processes need to be really, really clean, well above scrutiny from the person in the street. So my gut feel is that as elected members, we're better to steer clear. So in my own personal situation, I've never been involved in developing an RPS or sitting as a commissioner with an RPS. So I've no experience. I've got no technical education or qualifications. I certainly haven't got the time. So yeah, I would certainly not be putting my hand up for any role as an elected member sitting as a commissioner. Thank you.
I'd like to move that currently elected ORC councillors be not considered as ORC nominees to hear submissions on the RPS 2021.
Submissions on the RPS. Oh, okay, yeah.
I'll second that and we can talk about it.
And to incorporate the other recommendations as well, Councillor Laws, and seconded Councillor Calvert. Yep. Anyone else here to speak on this matter? Councillor Hobbs, you had your hand up.
Can I speak to the motion?
Oh, sorry, yes. Sorry, you were going to
Well,
speak.
no,
Sorry.
I'll defer to Councillor Hobbs and then I'll speak after.
Okay, I was going to say that there are two reasons why I would not support councillors being on this. And one reason is that we have an extraordinary amount of work to do this year. I mean, I just keep looking at the gigantic bloody things coming out of government that I have to read and understand. And so I'm a bit worried about that when I looked at this is very intensive time process, isn't it? It's huge. That was one thing. The second thing, I am, as always, troubled by the principle. And when the RMA stuff comes up for review, I may be making a private submission inside that Act, unless it's CLGA, just to look at that whole notion. I find it quite difficult. The third thing is this, is that there are good people out there in the community on all sides of the argument. Is there time to get them trained, to actually open up an opportunity for people to train before February 2022? That's just a question I leave out there.
I mean, it's probably Anita and Sarah better to talk to this, but as someone who has recently completed the Good Decisions course, that's technically the qualification. I guess, as we said in the paper, we're also probably looking for experience of particular skill sets relating to planning and the RPS. And so while they may be able to trained and available because they've completed the Good Decisions course, it's a question about experience as well and skill set.
If we knew people out there, but they were minus the RPS, is it possible to do that in that time?
So through you, Chair, they would technically be able to be trained in that time, but we were intending to seek people that were already qualified. The risk we run if we take someone that isn't qualified is they don't
have the experience,
don't manage to get the qualification, and it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And I've been in a situation in another council where that happened. That required some remedial assignments to get across the line, so it can be problematic. We could do it.
Okay, that's all right, darling. It was just I was trying to problem solve.
Thank you. Councillor Laws.
I'd just like to support the motion on the basis that of four central core arguments. The first is the obvious and clear conflict of interest, to the point that 5 councillors around this table either withdrew or declared an interest just in discussing this issue today. It gives you some idea of the sensitivities involved. The second is the expertise of the commissioners required, leading to the third issue, which would be incredibly problematic for this council to adjudge our colleagues and their commissioner abilities against those in the wide field. That would have massive personal and political risk attached. And the fourth one is the opportunity for all councillors to cast our final judgment. It will come to the point where we have to accept or not the recommendations, and for 2 folk to have been involved in framing those recommendations, and then to be involved in a wider discussion would be wrong. So for those reasons, I would suggest that the motion be passed through.
No. Councillor Baker.
I support the motion, Madam Chair. The motion put by Councillor Laws and Calvert, simply because as a councillor, I don't want to see the significant wisdom and experience of those around this table who are qualified lost to the rest of us. That would be a serious deficit in our consideration, so I'm going to support the motion.
Anybody else here to speak? Councillor Malcolm?
Just a question, could you please reread the motion?
Sure. Behind you on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't matter on the account.
Yeah, not quite correct, because he suggested that it was for the regional policy statement rather than freshwater hearing panel. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I took particular note of that. It's important that it is changed, I think, to that, in that this paper is specifically on the RPS, and to extend to all freshwater hearing panels is not the context in which this paper was actually written.
That's what I wanted to read.
It'll be another council by the time we get to the next point.
It reads that currently elected IRC councillors be not considered as the IRC's nominees to hear submissions on the Regional Policy Statement 2021.
I think people have got them, just waiting for Liz to capture it, but I think we understand.
Regional policy statement. You need to 2021.
So instead of freshwater hearing panel, we've
Down the
got
bottom.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yes, I see.
So that's something different. Is
the
that-
middle paragraph too.
Right.
Did not update there?
No.
No,
Well, that's
no.
weird, because I've got it updated on mine.
Oh, really?
How odd. Okay, I'll read you what I've got.
Yeah, that's good.
Confirms its position that Otago Regional Council elected members should not be considered nominees to hear submissions on the Regional Policy Statement 2021. And then everything else is the same.
Oh.
That is very strange.
Okay, yep. That's,
I'll stop the
that
share.
was the motion. That's fine. Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, so just, and I'm probably of a mind to support that for the reasons that the other councillors have suggested, but I wonder if at some stage we need to do some consideration as a council to actually decide on the role of councillors as commissioners. Because right from the very start in local government, I was encouraged to become a commissioner. I'm currently not, because I did go out of local government. But I think we need to do that. Or local government certainly needs to make some decision around that as to the relevance of us being commissioners and our position as governors. So I'd like to see that at some stage.
Yes, we should note that point in the minutes. It's an important one, and we do need to have that discussion as a council. It's come up a number of times, so let's note that and ensure that that happens. Thanks for bringing it up. Any other comments need to be made then? No?
Just if it's going to say regional policy statement, if you put that in capital so as you can refer to it further down.
Oops.
On the proposed region, or just because it's sort of
Yeah, I would have fixed it.
Thank you. All right. We can put that motion then at this point. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.
Abstain. I'd abstain.
abstaining.
Abstain
I
me.
think it's for elected members discussion.
We are not really recording, but we'll, yeah.
Could
The
I
motion
ask?
was
You can
one.
ask for it too.
Could I ask a related question to the report?
Sure.
And that's particularly around clause 10 in the identification of a tangata whenua or a commissioner with mātauranga and tangata whenua knowledge. Is there progress? Is there a process for that, or is it progressing adequately?
So through you, Chair, we'll be having those conversations with Okaha, but it's led by iwi rather than council.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to the next paper then, which is the Manuhira Kia engagement process. Again, a paper on a process which is a, I guess, the formal consultation as such, but an important part of ensuring that formal consultation, is effective as possible as well. So, no one's declared a conflict of interest at this point. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Kelleher's stepping back at this point. Anyone else care to? No. Okay. So, I will ask if you would like to introduce the paper and make any comments. Tom or Gunnar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you might have seen, I'm not the author of the report. The author was not available today. However, I'll take the paper as read, but I'm here to answer any questions that you may have around the process. We also have Lucy Summers from the comms team here. So if there's any questions around how we're going to advertise, how we're going to communicate our messages to the community, she'll be well placed to answer that. Perhaps 3 points that I want to note beforehand, before I take any questions, is we very briefly mentioned that we had some engagement with Kaitahu, and I thought it would be worthwhile to explain what we have done. So staff have been working with Okaha staff level, regularly in the development of the different scenarios. We also had a briefing, and we have committed to at least have one of the scenarios representing Okaha views. So one of the management scenarios would cater for Okaha views. Also, perhaps important to note is what is the timeline in terms of keeping governance level informed in the lead up to the engagement process. And a very brief timeline is included at the end of the paper, which shows when we're going to talk to the Land and Water Regional Plan Governance Group and Council. And then finally, some of you might have questions as well as how does it work in with the Plan Change 7 hearings, because both processes occur at the same time. At present, based on the timeline that we've got from the court, there will be no hearings during the actual days when we're consulting with the community. There will be some hearings across the wider consultation period, but when the actual meetings take place, there's no hearing schedule. There is, however, a possibility, or actually a likelihood, that there will be some expert conferencing on that day. But it's really hard to avoid overlap.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Deaker, we'll start with questions.
Yep. Thank you, Tom. I'd really like to hear from Lucy on what the comms team have got in mind for engaging with the Manuhira Kia community.
Welcome. Nothing like being on the spot, but yeah, welcome. And just feel free to answer what you can at this point, yeah.
Do you want me to just give a summary, or would you?
Yep.
So probably the big main thing is that there'll be a consultation period open for 4 weeks. And during that time, there'll be a document called the Manuhira Kia Choices document, which will outline 4 options for managing the catchment for the community to comment on. So they'll be able to download that from our website, or read online, or ask for a printed copy to be sent to them. And those options will be laid out in the document, as well as some of the background and how we've come to those scenarios we've put together. People can then go online and have their comments, or they can come to the meetings. So the meetings will be held towards the beginning, so the 30th and 31st of March. There'll be one meeting in Alexandra, or two in Alexandra, so one lunchtime one evening, and then in Omako as well, one lunchtime one evening. And so people can give feedback in person at those events, or they can take away the booklet and think about it and go back online, or email us. So that's the main big document. But to let people know about the meetings themselves, we'll be doing advertising in the local papers and the ODT. We'll be doing digital advertising. We'll be geo targeted to the area, and we'll be doing a letterbox drop of a brochure, or a little brochure that will just let people know when they can go to the meetings, and also article online. We will do, and we'll also be doing some radio advertising, and we'll have articles in our on-stream newsletter, and there'll be something in the next Waterlines newsletter that goes out to all rural letterboxes. And social media, so there'll be some Facebook events for the board meetings, and other posts just to remind people to come along.
So just wanted to support Lucy in terms of what she's just said. There's obviously an extensive work program that sits behind what goes into this Manahiri Care Choices document, and we've put workshops in your diary. We will come and talk to you, just like we did with Arakadrona. We will come and have a workshop with you about the content of the actual document prior to us going out for consultation. So you'll be well across the content of the options being put forward as well.
Thanks very much, Lucy and Gwyneth. That sounds very thorough.
Yeah, we've got a list of people who are keen to speak.
That's question or speak?
Questions first.
Oh, sorry, questions. Yeah, people who are keen to ask questions. Good point. So the first one is Councillor Deaker, then Calvert, then Laws, then Hope, then Allison. Deaker's finished. Calvert.
Okay, three little sort of questions. When something goes out in water lines, when you say to rural post boxes, do they go out to ratepayers if you've got emails?
It goes out in Southern Rural Life as an insert. So it's all rural. Yeah. I think it's all RD addresses. Yeah.
Unless you ask not to have that delivered to you.
Yes. So it doesn't go to people who are ratepayers if
they
they're
are
not
ratepayers.
It goes to a subset of ratepayers. It doesn't go to ratepayers, people we know pay rates but who don't have a letterbox.
Not for
as it
water
were.
lines, no.
Usually absentee and not serving consultation.
Excuse me?
Just joking.
Absentee ratepayers are ratepayers. Anyway, so I'm just wondering whether there's ever any reason to send things out to people who we know exist and we know have an interest, but don't get picked up through rural funds. I'm just, I guess, asking. Yeah.
So
anyway.
So is that a waterline specific? So it's not about this program. It's specific to waterlines as well.
No, I'm just thinking waterlines generally could go out to
landowners.
Landowners if they've got email addresses, and then they would. I'm just sort of, I guess, asking that. The second thing is, could we, as soon as that's available on the 4th and 5th of March, the management scenarios and consultation document, could we have that sent to us or put in our...
Yep, so I just indicated in the last question that we have a workshop. Someone's going to have to remind me of the date.
That's the 10th. I'm saying
on the 6 days afterwards.
Whatever. On the 4th, can we have given
I'll
to
have
us.
to. I'd have to refer to staff exactly when.
Did you say the 4th of March?
I'm saying the 4th was a discussion.
MRG meeting.
An MRG.
Yes.
With MRG.
Yeah.
So it's available on the 4th.
Oh, well, we'll be seeking feedback from MRG on the 4th, so we maybe make changes after the 4th.
And we can't see it before when they see it, or what? Is there a reason why not?
Well, I guess we're using the stakeholder processes that we've set up to get the document into the complete state before we, as complete as possible before we bring it to you. So we're having, we will go through the MRG, and that has stakeholder representatives from across the community on that. We'll get their feedback. We'll go through the land and water governance group, and then we'll come and we'll also provide a workshop to you on the contents of the consultation document.
I just find when we have a workshop, if that's the first date we ever see anything, it's quite a big ask for us to make any sensible comments, as you might have noticed. But the earlier we can have them, the better. And if we get them for a workshop, we often get them sort of the night before the workshop or the day. And I'm just thinking this one,
we'll take on board
at least a draft of it.
We'll take on board and see how early we can get you documentation for the workshop prior to the workshop. Yeah, it's quite tight timelines, but we'll do our best to get it beforehand.
I'm just saying it would help us if they're mostly.
It wouldn't be designed until.
And the last thing is, I would find it quite useful whenever, and this is just a very little example, but whenever we are advised that something has the support and buy-in of someone that those someones are specified. So key stakeholders doesn't, to me, specify who is agreeing with us. So if we have a document from staff that says has the support and buy-in of the hydrologists and key stakeholders, I would find it really useful to know who you meant when you said that. And if, for instance, key stakeholders is different from stakeholders, are there some who weren't key that didn't buy in, or, so if we could just know who instead of that.
That might be a question of who are the key stakeholders,
The key stakeholders would be the stakeholders represented in the TAG and the MRG.
Yeah.
So that would be Fish and Game, Dog.
So it's presumed. I presumed it was the ones further up that are Forest and Bird, Central Otago District Councils, those ones above. But
they are part of that as well.
They're described as stakeholders, but down here we're describing key stakeholders. And I just, if you're going to use that term, could you tell us just who it is? Yeah. If it's the same people, that's
okay. Fair point. Yep. They're either stakeholders or they're not. I guess there's not key ones, and when you get into a hearing scenario, anyway. Yep. All right. Is that all from you, Councillor Calvert? Councillor Laws.
I just want to sort of support that, Gwyneth. The problem is that this is going to go into the community before it comes to us. Now, there's the workshop's on the 11th, and it's going to go to the MRG on the 4th week beforehand.
So MRG is not community; they're the stakeholder group we've had in place since 2019. That we've been.
It's a community.
Can I just make a comment to that through you, Chair? You've got to remember this, what's being built up by staff is based on what has been happening with the MRG group and with TAG. So the process on the 4th and 5th is really confirming that has been captured by the staff before that document goes out.
No, that's fine. But
so it's not community.
But it is a community. It's a community of selected individuals and particular interest groups. Many of whom are my constituents. Now, I'm just trying to work out, though, from this, there would be no problem, as I see it, that if you put out the 4th and 5th document discussion, that you also gave it to governance as well. The reason I say that, Madam Chair, is this is a relatively politically sensitive matter, Manuhira Kia, number one. So I think we should be on the same, knowing what's happening in the same real time as what's happening in the MRG and TAG. But the second reason is we also might potentially get feedback that we should at least be informed about. And the third reason is because this is the prototype, to a large extent, for consultation with other rohi. So it's nice to, in actual fact, front-end load your governance rather than at the end.
Is it a, sorry, frame it maybe as a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just checking with Gwyneth that there wasn't any physical reason why, when you put out the management scenarios to the MRG, you couldn't put out those scenarios also to the elected councillors.
So I guess we've formulated the MRG. It's been in place since 2009. I don't know when, before my time. When did it start?
Just after the election last term.
Last term.
Yeah, so let's say November.
So it's been since well before November last year that we've had MRG.
2019.
Oh, 2019. It is a forum through which we have developed this work. I guess my concern as a kind of a member of staff is that we try and develop up this work with our stakeholders to the point where we then bring it to you for consideration and consult and for your consideration. If we bring it to you at multiple stages along the way, we'll just be bringing, like, I don't know where we stop.
But this is the business end. This is finally getting to where the rubber's hitting the road.
Which is why we have put in, I believe we've put in tentatively 2 workshops, one on the technical and one on the consultation document itself, all right? Definitely one on the consultation documents in the diary, but we're talking about potentially providing more in-depth around the technical so that we can give you as much information as we have before we go out to the community. What I don't quite understand is why you want some it's not fully developed because we haven't finished engaging with the stakeholders, and that's what the purpose of MRG is, and that's what the purpose of the 4th and 5th is.
Maybe if this is a debate type scenario, then we move to that. Later on, you've got the answer to the question, so that's good. I'm not disagreeing or agreeing. So, thank you. Is there any other questions, Councillor Laws, at this point?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hope.
Oh, thank you. Lucy, I was just trying to work out what you were saying before. You have the consultation document, am I right? And did you say they bring it back to people once they've filled it out? Did I get that wee bit right? I just wanted to explore that a wee bit more with you.
So they'll be able to give feedback at the meeting, or they can feedback later online.
So how do they give feedback at the meeting? And I don't mean to be smarty pants, but I'm just asking you, like, is it they've written it on the document? Is there a box to put it into? Because you know everybody can be quite different. Some people like to talk in public, some people don't.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a presentation at the beginning, and then followed by discussion. And I believe, I don't know, Tom, if you know whether it's...
so you've got some choices.
Yeah,
on how you do
make
it.
A choice at the meeting.
Yes. Yes.
And I don't know if we've quite got to the detail of how they'll do that, whether it'll be by talking to us or whether it be by putting, something into a box.
Yes.
There'll certainly be a system once we get there.
And maps on the wall, because that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what we've noticed. Lots of other different, like Arrowtown and Condrone, I'm thinking, isn't it? How people engage in different ways.
Yeah. So
there'll be a mixture.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mr. Allison.
Kia ora, my question is around the fact that the Manuhiri Care scenarios and processes running ahead of the RPS and, of course, the LWRP. The outcomes of the RPS have yet to be confirmed. I think, and certainly to Manawatawai, I'm pretty clear it's not being integrated at that RPS level yet. So, how is the Manuhiri Care process going to respond?
Yeah, so we've got a draft vision already. I think as staff we need to make sure that, because we've got a definition now of Te Manawatawai, I believe, at RPS level, or draft definition?
From us, yes you have, yeah.
And so it's probably, perhaps Lisa can compliment me, but checking whether the definition of Te Manawatawai is consistent with the draft vision for Manuhiri Care.
So, through you, Chair, when we did the freshwater visions work, we took a different approach for the Manuhiri Care because we'd had so much consultation with the community previously. So we actually drafted a freshwater vision. We drafted that freshwater vision as part of the framework that we've set up in that freshwater chapter for the RPS. So I guess from that perspective, the vision that is drafted and the feedback that we've got, we've now tweaked it a little bit, which we brought to council last week or the week before, that does reflect the framework we currently have at the moment in terms of what we've drafted as Te Mana O2Y. We're about to start clause 3 consultation on the RPS, so there'll be further refinement of the RPS as we go through that process, and that probably dovetails quite well from a timing perspective with the process that Tom and his team are doing for the Mana Here So if there's any changes that come out of that, they're going to have to be fed into through that process, and vice versa. Does that answer the question?
What I've seen so far, it's not being reflected in the drafts at all, and I think that's because people don't understand it properly. So I'm really anxious, or I think we both are anxious, that if we don't get it, because the Mana Here Care is spearheading, for want of a better word, it's ahead of the RPS and the LWRP, which is a back-to-front process, and we changed the process that we were engaged in. We didn't sit in the MRG, we have representation on the technical committee. I'm not sure that...
Could you just clarify, just for me, Edford, are you specifically talking about the freshwater vision piece,
No.
which is the director? You're talking about the broader one? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess where we're at with that in terms of the RPS process is that we understand. I mean, I'm now aware as of a few minutes ago that we want to talk about this at Mana Te Mana, but we have at the moment we have been working through Ōkaha to get the feedback that has been built into the current draft of the RPS. So what's sitting with the policy team at the moment is, as Lisa indicated, they're about to go into clause 3 consultation based on that feedback that we've received through Ōkaha to date. Under the RPS. But I'm just wary that this is a topic about the RPS and not the Mana Here Kia. The Mana Here Kia, obviously, like RPS, will then, the land and water plan has to reflect the RPS as a whole, and also the freshwater vision specifically that's currently getting, I'm not sure where have we got comment. We haven't got commentary back on the visions yet, or not from Ōkaha?
We have.
We have, okay. Yeah.
Councillor Malcolm was next, unless you've got further questions at this point.
It's probably relevant to just a question regarding the same that
Sorry, I was just going to check that
Edward's
finished with his questions. Yeah.
Well,
He's not finished with his answer.
There's a chance to have discussion soon after a motion. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor
Am I
Malcolm.
correct to understand that on page 18E, 30th of June 2021, the drafting of the Mana Here Care Roe chapter of the LWRP will be complete, and I assume that will include all our terms of submissions or context of the RPS and everything within that. That will be our first cut of what we're trying to. That puts Mana Here Care as the first group to have that done.
I think technically Arikadrona might be slightly ahead, but yes, the MAC catchments, as they often referred to, Arikadrona, Mana Here Kia.
Yes.
We're looking to have our drafting of the chapter for the land and water plan for those rohi done.
So that would have gone through all the process with Ōkaha and iwi and the likes, plus back to the MRG and.
So don't forget this is all pre-formal notification. Are we talking about the land and water plan now? Yeah. So this is, as you know, aware, we have quite a number of FMUs and rohi to get through before 2023. So this will be the first batch where we will have a draft chapter, which then in 2023 will be amalgamated with all of the other rohis and the regional plan in itself, and then that will come through the standard process for notification in 2023.
Sorry, Tom. Yeah.
If I just may add to that, through you, Madam Chair. We referred, or earlier reference was made to a chapter, Rohe chapter for Arrow and Cardrona. The scope of those processes is very limited, really. What we're doing is just determining limits for quantity, so minimum flows and allocation limits. So there won't be a rule framework around it. That is parked until we do actually the whole row hay. But the limits, there should be clarity around preferred options for limit setting in Arrow and Cardrona. In terms of iwi involvement in coming to those options, again, we took it to the governance group. And before that, we had a workshop with Aukaha as well around our preferred option. And they build on cultural values assessments as well. And
Councillor Scott, wasn't it, next for a question?
My question has been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other particular technical questions then? I think perhaps Mrs. Gardner, did you want to answer, any of the things you've picked up on questioning or not?
I guess I just wanted to be clear, because I'm not 100% certain that we might be talking at cross purposes, and I'm not 100% certain that the answers that the staff have provided, while they're not incorrect, necessarily fully answer the question that you had, Mr. Allison. I think what I'm hearing is that the RPS creates the overarching Te Mana o Te Wai framework, and your concern is that the scenarios that have been produced and will go to be considered do not necessarily have all of that context. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I think there's a disconnect between we might, as staff, have felt we've progressed to, and the concern that you're raising. That's,
I think, the purpose
what
of
I'm hearing.
We're all trying to get to a smooth process that's going to be as effective and useful as possible to getting to a really good land and water plan. And there's a couple of things that have been raised in the questioning that are questions, but they're issues that will come out as we continue after a motion and discussing and debating. I think one is the timing of when governors themselves receive the information regarding scenarios, and the other is, I guess, around iwi partnership, the interconnection of the RPS with the land and water plan, and that's regardless, they do merge together, and how we go through this process will relate to that. And then I guess, have we missed any key stages? Where is it? Where's the page? On the next steps, I suppose, which is the process that we're discussing today.
Yes, we
is
do.
that the correct process? Is that the best process to come to the most effective and smooth and useful land and water plan?
Sorry, we're just talking about the Manuhira Care. This is
I
in the
know
whole
we're
land.
just talking about the Manuhira Care, and we're actually also only talking about a specific part of the Manuhira Care, which is the flows and scenarios regarding them, is how it reads as well. So that would be my question. Is this about every value and limit, etc., in the FMU, or is it relating to water flows and allocation?
It's not just relating to flows and allocation, it goes wider. It goes into the water quality space as well.
Councillor, someone else apart from Councillor, who hadn't asked a question already, Councillor Hobbs.
Yes, it's really back to the last question that Edward brought up. Have I got it clear? Your concern is that the overall RPS, and I might use the wrong term, vision, Te Mana o Te Wai, which is nationally driven as well, your concern is that, as far as you can see, is not reflected in the Manuhira Kia. And since this is the first cab off the rank, that's why it's so important. I got it? Right. Sure?
Yes, that is correct. And the nature of our partnership, the reason we didn't participate directly in the MRG means we are reliant on those upper level framework documents. That's how it works for us.
Thanks, Ian.
Councillor Calvert. So, Tom, you would like to answer the question of Councillor Hobbs?
I'll have an attempt at answering that to you, Madam Chair. I think that's a problem for all the FMUs in a sense, because we're staging them and we're only proposing to notify what comes out of those FMU processes at the end of the process in 2023. I said a problem, probably that's not the right word, but it is something we need to take into account. At the end in 2023, we're going to have an opportunity to look as to whether those FMUs and what we come up with actually still is in accordance with legislation, because legislation is moving fast. It has been over the last couple of years, and it will continue to do so. We also need to develop our regional provisions as well. So we'll have to double check whether we're consistent with our regional approach as well. So I think this is not the end game. If you go to the community, ideally you want to have clarity around whether we actually give effect to Te Mana or to why. But what I'm trying to say is there is an opportunity to kind of fine-tune things if we arrive at the conclusion that the options now do not give effect to Te Mana or to why.
Oh, Councillor Calvert, but while we're on this subject, Mr. Ellison, did you want to?
I think what Tom is saying there is really where Inland are heading. We think that the ability to do that adjustment needs to be retained around what we're raising as issues, which potentially cannot be connected well if we run with the FMUs and they then remain intact from that point on. It'll isolate us.
Yeah. I guess the question, sorry, Councillor Calvert, would be whether or not the engagement through Ōkaha and staff level is effectively feeding in the partnership and those values at the front end that are really important, those discussions that we need to have as partners, and whether we've got that process right. We've got the land and water governance group. We've got staff who've outlined, how it's been happening at a technical type, staff type level, but are we missing something at the front end?
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't. My feeling is we're getting to the sharp edge of some sharp point in some of these planning processes. I don't think we've got it quite sorted. The staff at Ōkaha are reliant on the Arunanga to give them guidance. They cannot go forward without that, and we've been developing the Te Mana o te Wai statement, which was transferred to the Regional Council in October. And they are really reliant on that feed in from the Arunanga. But if they're a bit confused about the process, which they are, because it's a wee bit not clear for them, and things are getting in front of those mainframes, the RPS, the LWRP, it's not easy for them either to work in that time, in that framework. It's not 100% at the moment.
Sorry, that is related to that.
Councillor Calvert's next,
and mine's related to that too. I wonder whether what we're discussing here is two things, a report and then looking at the next steps. I would really find it helpful to see a conversation, sort of email trails or something, of you, Edward, and then putting the issue you're describing here, and what, or you sitting in a room with the staff and figuring out, is there a way through it that can come back and this is what we've come up with, or is the right thing for you to put that and for the staff to say, well, that's not, we understand your concern, but we can't do anything with it. I'd just like to see where we move on with some clarity, so as we either know whether, because I don't understand enough about it too, but I'd really like to see that in some email trail, or have a meeting and come out with it saying, here's the issue, here's what we're trying to do. Yes, you guys were generally happy with it, or no, you still see, and this is what the problem you still see is. Is that possible to sort of subsequent to this report, which is a staff report?
Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, that's a good question and comment, and I agree. Unfortunately, neither Lynn, I didn't realise Lynn couldn't be at the January meeting of the LWRP.
We tabled the question.
But it wasn't until that I saw the night before the papers, I thought, oops, something's not going right here, and so I've been thinking about how to trigger it. So we're taking the issue to the Manawa Te Mana meeting next week, and so some of those discussions will occur there. We do need to work this out, I agree, because I'm aware, and it's really shown itself this year rather than last year. I thought it was tracking okay, but it wasn't until this year then started seeing papers, oops, something missing.
I was hitting the road, isn't it? So,
that's right.
And we're better to get it right at the moment. So anyway, Ms. Gardner, did you want to answer?
So I think, and again, just testing this, but I think what I'm hearing is that the staff and Ōkaha have worked together, and that happens at one level, and that's not wrong. That's part of the system. But the piece of the system, or maybe two pieces of the system that are missing, that are the inputs into how we have the overarching view of Te Mana o Te Wai, and how that then filters down into that very specific catchment detail for the manuhiri care, is really about the relationship of the iwi partners. Is that right? So, and it's always been made really clear that that happens at the mana to mana table. So the Papatipu runanga, so the runanga chairs, and the governors of this council, and that is where that discussion happens. So I think that's the piece, perhaps, where the gap is. Please tell me if I'm not right. And then I'm also wondering if there's a connection then between the Papatipu runanga chairs and flax roots tangata whenua. Is that what I'm sort of gauging somewhere near where your thoughts are?
Yeah, I think you've outlined that well. The Papatipu runanga have been meeting as required to give the guidance and advice, development of Te Wai statements, which has been quite intense and has been done. And I fully appreciate how it's not going to be easily incorporated if you haven't got that mātauranga sitting around the table with the staff. That's where one of the issues are in terms of interpretation and consistency. The Papatipu runanga comment so far is they're a wee bit nervous about not seeing that transition well, and so that's why we're raising it now. It's just, we've designed a process which is not I don't think it's existing anywhere else, and so we've just got to refine it, revisit and refine it, and have some flexibility in there.
Oh, no, I can see the issue. I can see the issue before us today, which is a paper that has what next steps are and specifically spells them out. And it sounds as though we've also got mana to mana next week. And it looks as though we're going to need to add potentially at least something else into those next steps. Don't exactly know what the something exactly is till we've had a good thrash out of how we can improve. But so that's what we're saying at this point, but we've got before us now the task of trying to.
In relation to that.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Hobbs.
Sorry, Edward. I'm checking that I'm getting this absolutely correct in my head. I thought I heard you welcome the opportunity to amend vis-a-vis Te Mana o Te Wai and the Manahira Kia statement, the Rohi statement. And if that is what you were saying, because I think your dream is that before it goes out to the Manahira Kia process, in our mana to mana, we clarify things very clearly. If it were to be any post it going out to the Manahira Kia community, we would have to be very clear, would we have to be very clear that this was dependent on further negotiation with the iwi?
Yeah, I'm not so much, and that's why I'm targeting the RPS.
Right.
What I'm saying, if it's not right there, it's just going to cascade right through.
Okay, all right.
And we may as well not be here.
Okay,
to be honest.
No, I think I've got it.
Sorry, Councillor Scott, you were me.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good.
I will speak, but after Edward.
Oh, sorry, Edward.
Look, I've lost my train of thought.
Sorry, interrupted you.
If we don't have it right in the principal document, that's why I'm a wee bit off track, but that's where we're looking at the objectives and the RPS and the LWRP, the difficulty of running things the way they are, which has been confirmed as the process to follow.
Yeah.
But it's tricky to be confident that you're going to get an outcome that is consistent across all FMUs with the RPS, the LWRP, and that's where the nervousness is.
Particularly when you're going up with FMUs.
Yeah. I think I'll leave it at that at the moment.
Scott.
My view is that there's no secrets in the RPS. There's no secrets in the Te Mana Te Wai, and that we shouldn't be going out to consultation with the community until we've got iwi sign-off. That's my view. I see you squinting, Madam Chair.
I'm just not sure the sign-off is not
well sign-off. But I mean, for example, we on the next steps, we referred to the MRG, and so there's discussion. There's discussion there. Okay, not necessarily sign-off, but there's discussion. There's also discussion with the Land and the Water Governance Group, but there's no mention of iwi. In my view, I can't imagine a situation where this council, goes out to the community that says, oh, by the way, this mightn't necessarily align with the iwi view, or some of the options might align. Why don't we take this opportunity to do this right? So in my view, there should be a date in there that actually has the discussion with iwi. Now, you've already referred to the mana to mana group. Well, if that is the situation, well, it needs to be in there with some formality. And so we talked about this earlier today, so that we all can be on a similar page. So my first point is, I believe iwi discussion date needs to be in there, and some reference around that. And also in relation to the earlier discussion from Councillor Laws about the MRG, when they get it and when the community gets it, my personal view is we should leave the MRG to do the job that it was tasked to do. And they've got to find, as other councillors said, they've got a final discussion, so we should leave that alone. And if councillors were to get it, I assume it would be around the 9th or the 10th after the Land and Water Governance Group have had a look at it. I myself, I also need to say at this point, I'm not here on the 11th, so I've emailed Anita, if that's the right person, asking if I can attend the meeting on the 9th to find out what's going on. Thank you.
So firstly, I'd like to point out that we have 2 representatives, iwi representatives on the Land and Water Governance Group. That they are Ranaka representatives, and that's where we engage at through the Land and Water Plan with Ranaka. And then obviously we come to strategy and planning, where we have 2 iwi reps, and then we have council as well. On top, in addition to that,
nevertheless, there seems to be an issue.
So I think there's 2 things being discussed kind of in parallel here, right? One's the RPS and Manawatu Waiā, and one is the conversation about this document. I'm happy to be corrected, Edward, but I think the discussion you were targeting is RPS rather than Manahira Choices document specifically. Yes, yeah. So I think that's going to be discussed at Mana next week. And happy to have that discussion there. In terms of the Manahira Choices document, we've had a number of conversations with Kaha about the contents. As Tom indicated, one of the options being put forward is iwi's preferred option as well as part of that consultation process. We've also had a full technical briefing with Okaha staff as well, so they're across, I guess, from the same amount of the same technical information that we've been taking to MRG throughout the process. So again, we can if there is need for another meeting, and I'm not sure, clear from your question, Brian, whether it's a meeting with Kaha and technical staff or it is a meeting with Ranaka outside of the Land and One governance group. We're happy to look at incorporating that in, depending what people need.
I have got a worry or 2 or 3. The Manahira Reference Group, while that group has only been going since 2019, the Manahira Choices and that group has been going together, I think, since 2013. So that's been going together for quite some time, the bulk of that group. My real worry is that on the 4th and the 5th, we're going to them with a group of scenarios that they believe from the correspondence they have had to date will include a preferred agreed position by iwi. Now, and that was as little as discussing with CO's representatives and other representatives last week. So that's the position that they believe. If Edward believes that this is not that is not iwi's position, then I think we perhaps should be getting that corrected or altered before we go with our to the Manahira Reference Group, because it's simply going to it's just not good. It just takes the whole integrity of the process right out the window, and I just think that's very, very poor governance, very, very, very poor governance. So if that position is known now, we should be perhaps making steps now to remedy or mitigate that position, or make that very clear that that's the position.
Not sure if it's a question that we're comfortable answering, or
well, I believe that
asking it, because that's the whole point of having these stakeholder groups, and the Manahira Reference Group is very supportive of the position that iwi have taken and the way it is being handled through by our staff through Okaha. So we've got to be on solid footing, because if we're not on solid footing, you will not hear the end of it, and it's just not right.
Got that, yep.
Want to, as we understand from a staff perspective, we have a preferred flow that's been given to us by. Is that right?
I believe there have been discussions at staff level around flows that would accommodate for certain for cultural values.
Yeah. So we have
my understanding, though I'm not directly involved in those, but yeah.
Mr. Allison, if you want to comment.
It's been 8 days of flow study done, and there's 2 in terms of to meet a scientific standard, they need 2 more days. 10 days of flow data, and then you'll get a firm answer. You've probably got a commentary rather than a definite position. It would be my reading of it.
We'll have to come back to you because obviously I think the project manager, Rachel's on leave, so she wasn't able to speak to it, but she's probably across the detail of what we have in hand. But we're not going to go out with the Manahira Key Choices document without that information, because it's, as Tom's indicated, we want to have the iwi preferred option as in the document. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds like we have a discussion next week at Mana to iron out some process stuff.
Could we, before the normal minutes would come out of that meeting, have the rest of us be given what's come out, the draft, as it were, minutes from that meeting as soon as it's been had? Would be good.
Yeah, I can't see at this point.
Just so as we know how it's
that's
progressing, because it's
the understanding that we've had. Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah.
Such as it
Okay.
was.
Councillor Lords, you had your hand up.
Well, I've just got a question. We've got a workshop next week, 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, on the technical details of the Manahira Kia. That's correct? So you're coming to that, Edward?
I think I am. Well, it's a majority.
Yeah. So we will be discussing at that, presumably, what that means, the implications of the factual scenario.
So we will be talking about the technical information, and then the following workshop is what's in the consultation document as preferred options, are the implications.
And that's the 11th of March workshop?
That's right.
Okay. But in between those 2 workshops, you're going to the MRG and you're discussing 4 scenarios that the staff have put together. Not the MRG, Brian.
No. Sorry, no, you're wrong there.
Okay, well, I'm just checking. Yes, can you tell me? What part of that is wrong?
Clarify.
Yeah, can you clarify?
Okay, the MRG, the whole group came up with a range of scenarios from here to here, and we've picked 4 points in those ranges to...
The MRG have.
Yeah, the MRG have. And staff have gone back.
So MRG have agreed to the 4 points in the range of possible scenarios that could be there that will be going out in terms of consultation. So that was around the minimum flows. There's another conversation around allocation will be happening at the next MRG meeting.
So the process isn't being, because the paper reads in such a way that you could get the interpretation that management are putting these scenarios out, not the MRG. That's just what I wanted to clarify.
So MRG's role in terms of reference is to advise ORC.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. So the next question, the issue is, if iwi, can I ask Edward, are you saying to me you're not happy that one of those 4 options be the iwi option, that you need to be much higher in the decision-making level than there? Is that correct?
It's quite a good question, to be honest. Yeah. We're certainly looking to have a lot of confidence at the higher level that the overarching policy and statements will influence the final scenario or option.
Yes, and there's the issue, isn't it? Because if the consultation document goes out, here are 3, plus here's the 4th, by the way, it's iwi's, it's almost a sort of ghettoisation, if I might use that phrase, of, I mean, here's me arguing that, but there you are, it is.
I am not. Are you familiar with the option? Have we got an option? No, I didn't think we had. They may have talked about one.
Yeah,
it sounds like we.
Because, and so I don't want to disadvantage you, but I also don't want to disadvantage any people who are consulted as well by saying, well, you've got these 3 sort of sensible options, if you like, and here's iwi, And I mean, that's not a consultation process at all. So I'm just I'm checking that that's right, because I would like to think that all 4 scenarios are scenarios that iwi doesn't accept or agree with, but is at least comfortable that they're being put out for the consultation. Have I got that right?
I think that's fair enough, Michael. I think what we've been saying is we are really, we hang our hat on the RPS, the LWRP, mana with the Y, but really 6E. 6E. And there's much to be said about mana with the Y, but I won't go into that here. But
And finally, one question. Thank you for answering that. So the next issue would be, given that that's the case, you obviously accept that you might not necessarily get the answer back from that consultation process that you necessarily want, but that's just the way we all enter the process. Is that correct?
yes, yep.
Thank you. I feel very comfortable with that outcome.
We're better to have transparency and clarity for everyone. Yep, that's great. Alexa, I've been a bit remiss in asking whether or not you had any questions or anything you wanted to clear up from your end.
Found a funny thing, Madam Chair, thank you, and that is if you listen long enough, someone else asks the question and you get the answers.
There you go.
I'm very interested in this discussion, and I share Edward's concerns, and I want to see them resolved. So on we go. Thank you.
Well, we're at the point, I think, where we've all had a good chance to thrash around the issue. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hobbs, you've got one more.
It was not a question. This was those holding us till comment stage.
Yeah, that's where we need to get to. So
Okay.
we have recommendation, back to recommendation, which at the moment is just receiving this report.
That's right.
But I guess in doing that, where I came straight to was the next steps, and in receiving it, you're kind of assuming that that's set in concrete.
Right, so it's to do with.
So what we really need, I think, is a motion that we can then debate. So we could have somebody move that it's received as a report, and we could refine it, or does anyone have any changes?
Happy to move that we receive the report, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
do we have a seconder for that, Councillor Hope? Now we can enter into debate on that motion. Councillor Hobbs.
Okay, thank you, dear. And it's actually, in a way, the iwi's reflections on some of the stuff comes up with mine. I've been recipient of several phone calls, unsolicited, from various people in the Manuhiri Kia, unhappy with the MRG, okay? Felt that their voices were not heard, felt that they might have been heard but ignored, and they ended up not coming, okay? Now, I worry about that in terms of, and I'm kind of looking for reassurance that in these next steps, it's not everything that's happened in the MRG is set in concrete, but these wider groups who have felt disenfranchised, I'm not saying whether they're right or not, but that's their feeling of disenfranchisement, of being ignored, of being patted on the head, that those groups are able to contribute via these next steps. Because we have to have this is a divided community, and not divided numerically, but we have to have some faith in this process.
I guess the other point is that it's being regarded as a catchment of national significance as well. So
Right.
as well as specific local community, it has a really important place in Aotearoa.
Yep.
Okay, so sorry, is it a question that you'd like to comment, Gwenna?
I was just going to say this phase of the process is consultation with all community. It's not MRG just provides advice, as I indicated to the previous question, to ORC.
So we have to make that really clear, is what I'm trying to say.
Anybody else like to speak on the motion? Councillor Calvert.
I thought when it said receives this report that we are receiving what's happened in a report on what's happened, but actually the executive summary says that it includes the next steps effectively. So by receiving this, we are really adopting or accepting the next steps. And I'm just a wee bit concerned about where this discussion, if we just receive this report and therefore the next steps, we've just wasted, an hour and a half or whatever, going round in a circle, expressing concerns, saying we're concerned about where iwi fits in and things, and then we just go ahead and do what we were doing.
I think possibly, sorry if this could help at all, where Councillor Scott came from with noting of mana to mana as a first step might go some of the way to at least acknowledging that there's another step.
So,
in which case I would be happy to suspend my discussion if Councillor Scott is intending to try an amendment to this.
Yeah, I'd move an amendment or an addition to the motion, whatever's easiest.
Yeah.
It's quite simply that discussion of management scenarios and consultation occurs with iwi, possibly at mana to mana. Or quite simply, like at the moment, the next steps are discussion of management scenarios and consultation of the MRG, then the Land and Water, and simply in addition to that, simply saying exactly the same to happen with iwi. Discussion of management scenarios and consultation document with iwi. And the detail of it can be just addressed, but at least
it's about to share on the screen. Thanks, Councillor Scott. Yeah.
Or even I would even delete the mana to mana because it's ring fencing the time. It may even occur a number of times, and so simply just say that needs to be a step. Maybe our CE will have a comment on it.
I just thought maybe with iwi including at mana to mana, and then.
Will we get to management scenarios in time for mana to mana next week?
Yeah, that's my concern. So
I'm not sure that is.
I don't want to, but my understanding, I don't know the full details of the agenda's just come out from mana to mana. My understanding is we'll be talking about the RPS at the mana to mana. So that is a discussion around the RPS.
Or to Y, isn't it?
Specifically around that.
So it's not, sorry if that's okay, Councillor Scott, I think it's to mana or to Y as a wider discussion initially, but I might...
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And it then might come, the discussion
But that will dovetail with the other. Yeah.
So, sorry, I might be wrong though.
I think it's both. Isn't it? Yes. It's the mana OTY and the management scenarios and consultation. And at this point, I'm going to shut up and ask Edward what the real answer is.
The agenda item is specifically talking about mana to Y, which we don't think has influenced or reflected adequately in the RPS objectives.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then it's also not being understood how it fits.
Yeah, but it's ultimately going to impact on the management scenarios.
Absolutely.
So I would have thought, at such a meeting that you'll talk about the mana to Y, and then spend some time talking about the implications of it on the scenarios.
Right.
Yeah? Yep. So I would have thought it was both. Yeah.
Okay, so we have now got a motion of receiving the report. We've got
I'm in the middle
amendment.
After the amendments, if it's been moved, I'd like to go back to what I was saying.
Okay.
Anyway, I move that.
Mover and a seconder, Councillor Deaker, for the amendment. Now,
can I just? Sorry, I'm just concerned, right? So in terms of timing for staff and the management scenarios at mana to mana next week, right? Before we come through
the actual numbers, I think that we're discussing if they're not ready, but we're talking about the general concept, like now. I think.
Okay, could we maybe broaden the language to not management scenarios, I'm assuming for the mana here at Kia, but to how the implications for the FMUs on the land and water plan? Is that all right?
That's a good
Please,
way of wording it. Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
Councillor Calvert, you want to speak on that?
Yes, and finishing what I was saying is that I would like that to also move an amendment saying that governance would be provided with what's being provided on the 4th and 5th of March to the MRG, and I presume it's not going to change much, especially if, and I'm not sure with what Kevin was saying, who produced these 4 scenarios, whether it was MRG or whether it was staff or some combination. But if it goes through MRG and they've already had a look at it and sort of produced at some level most of the 4 scenarios, nothing much is going to change. But I would like to see us having what goes on the 4th and 5th, and I appreciate that it might well be a document that we talk about at the workshop, which has got track changes or something on it that have come out of that last couple of days and things, but I would like to see in there that we get that at that point.
You're moving. We've had comment on that before, but yep.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. Just for clarity, my understanding is on the 4th and 5th we're not discussing the consultation document. It's purely about the numbers that will feed into the scenarios and getting
Well,
agreement
it says discussion of management scenarios and consultation document. So whatever.
Reads slightly misleading. Yes, I'm not going to do that.
So can I, having been at the last mana to mana, we just discussed the structure, for instance, of the document, not necessarily the word specific of the document. So it just might be that you're getting a summarisation or a structure rather than the actual true contents, which is what we'll present to you for the workshop.
What you'd be presenting on the 4th and 5th, knowing that you may well tweak it once you've done those 2 processes. So I'd like an amendment just to say that we will receive that.
Okay, you're moving another amendment, 3, is it?
So,
I think we're probably going to get it anywhere. I'm just saying it would be good too.
Madam Chair, I would ask that they be considered separately. They are separate issues.
I may not have a seconder.
That'd be easier. I think it's important to spell. Yeah. That committee receive a copy of.
Exactly.
That isn't. It isn't. Councillor Galvin.
It isn't.
No.
Inputs.
It is receiving prior or at the same time the information that will be presented
It'll
at that.
Prepared for, and when it's presented to them at the same time. Or
the same information.
It's the MRG meeting documents. MRG meeting documents.
Okay.
Councillor Malcolm, from your perspective, are there any? We need a seconder for that first.
Yes, and contemporaneously to the meeting.
Chair and meetings training.
Anybody like to second that? Yep. You would? Yep, okay. Councillor Malcolm. Are we taken separately then? Nobody wants to comment on this particular one?
That's number 3, is it? For the,
Yes, it's number 3, sorry, but it will be,
So we're going to add them together.
Or do you record it as number 1, do you, again, of a separate?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
The other one's carried.
Yeah. They're going to be taken separately, Councillor Calvin, and that's how you record
We
that.
haven't voted on the first one.
So we've dealt with that one. It's we know that's coming up. We'll go back to the first one and second one, which is receive this report.
We've been carried.
We did those.
No.
Do it now then.
Okay,
do it.
Yeah. Receives the report and continue discussions of Te Mana o Te Wai and implications for FMUs on land and water regional plan in consultation with iwi, including at Mana Te Mana. Mover and second. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. On to the next one, which has one part to it. Receives a copy of the information presented at the 4th and 5th of March MRG meeting, which Liz will expand out to what that is. Contemporaneously to the meeting, you've got a quick comment. Councillor Malcolm.
Second. Look, all I'd say there, in my consultation with CO's representatives and other groups in the Manahiri Care, one of their big worries at the moment is not receiving that information soon enough before the meeting, with a decent amount of time before them. And I know you're under extreme pressures, but this is a huge decision for everyone to digest and to see where it is all at. So to get it a day or so before the 4th or 5th is a bit tough, because we're asking them to make some pretty critical decisions, and they would appreciate, certainly if they could get it the week before. But I understand from Andrew what's the pressures are, but I certainly would like time to digest it.
Yep, got that. Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. We'll put that then. All in favour? Aye. Against? Okay, motion is 1. Thank you. First paper. Well, thank you for all the discussion. Onto a completely, wait a second, have I missed one? No. Queenstown Transport business case. Thank you and welcome to Gavin and Gary. It's an important paper as well, and culminating from a lot of work that's gone on in bringing several business cases together, being worked on for a lot of time for specific Queenstown geographic routes and combining into a Queenstown business case. You'll see from the paper that it brings the 3, I don't know if you can have 3 partners, but we have got 3 partners in this project, yeah? I guess you can. Partners. Not in this case, it's a good thing. So just as part of this process, it's a Way to Go Partners project, and already the QLDC has considered this business case. So 2 weeks ago, they've signed it off, endorsed the way forward. And Transport Agency as well will look at that on the 24th of February. So today is our chance to consider this business case, which has some important ramifications there. My understanding, though, before we do that, is that we were going to add in a graph, or have we done that? Or do we want to do that? Or we can just speak on it anyway and highlight it as part of the business case if we want to. How would you like to handle that?
Yes, Madam Chair, I think if we just add it in, committee members will find it in the resource part of their iPad, and it's a graph that shows the demand projections, the extract from the business case, and also a glossary of terms that was omitted from the paper.
Yes, yeah. So note that was omitted, and you will find it there, and it'll be publicly available as well, so people can see that. The importance of that was with regards to the projections and aims of going from 17% to 40% mode share, what the ramifications, I guess, of that is. Does it mean we're improving? Are we maintaining where we were? Or is it slightly worse, but at least we've got traffic flowing? They're important considerations. But anyway, we do have this paper. Gary, did you want to touch on anything particularly, or Gavin?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr Maloney will speak to his paper, but just a reminder for councillors that we workshopped this matter with you on the 22nd of July last year. At that stage, the business case was quite well advanced, but still in draft form. And subsequent to that, it's been finalised. The key elements that were shared with you last year around the programme and the timing and the key assumptions are unchanged. So just a reminder that you will have seen most of this material before in that workshop. So what's happened is this has now been finalised and comes to you for endorsement. It's not the end of the process, there are further things to be done. So it's really part of a continuous process, and this enables that process to continue. It's also been subject to regular updates to the Transport Governance Group that several councillors are members of as well. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the business case really highlights the significant transport problems that Queenstown will experience going forward. While a lot of the work, of course, has been done pre-COVID, they've looked at that and, based on QLDC's assessment, they believe that they'll be back to pre-COVID levels by 2024. With respect to the work actually sets us up looking to the future, and it means that if we're not back to those pre-COVID levels by 2024, it just moves stuff further out. But there is an expectation we're going back to it. In terms of, Madam Chair, your question, the 40% mode share that they're projecting for 2028 will mean that traffic conditions in terms of private motor vehicles on State Highway 6A will be as they are today, but it will mean for our public transport service, they will be able to travel a lot more quickly because of the bus priority and the preemption it signals that the project brings. Just in terms of the scale of the problem, you'll read in the paper perhaps that in 2019, State Highway 6A on 140 days of the year was at capacity, and that was based on then. And if we did nothing going forward, you'd need to look at providing another 3,000 car parks in Queenstown Town Centre, basically turn it into a parking lot. They've looked at a range of options to try and deal with that growth in travel, and that was right from car friendly. It was on a spectrum, basically, right from car friendly through to what can we do with the other options. In terms of what came out the preferred way forward, it is promoting putting a lot more effort into walking, cycling and public transport in particular, supported by travel change initiatives. The car-friendly options, if you like, didn't sign off on there or line up particularly well with their investment objectives. And a lot of you will know what the topography and geology looks like around there and just how difficult it would be to buy property to put extra lanes of road in. The proposed solution is very public transport heavy. In terms of going forward, like the key action, and that's why we're seeking the endorsement of the business case, is to do the work on a detailed public transport business case. That will nail down, as we talked about, for shaping future Dunedin, the timing of those interventions, the cost of those interventions. At the moment, the higher level program business case, the Queenstown business case, talks about, with respect to air function, a wee jump up in 2024 if travel and numbers have come back to what we have today. And that's, to give you an example, a bit more frequency on the route that goes from Fernhill through to the airport, and maybe some larger vehicles. The significant change is proposed to happen in 27, but again, that's subject to what happens with respect to recovery and the business case work. Maybe I'll just leave it there and happy to answer questions.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Deakin and Councillor Scott.
Now, I'll start with the obvious question, Madam Chair. Gary, thank you for that summary. Preceded it by giving a very optimistic view of Queenstown's recovery. And yet I have a story open on the ODT website right now which says fares grow for Queenstown survival. With the Mayor of Queenstown Lakes District Council talking about Queenstown in 2025 being a boarded up ghost town.
We must be preparing for
now,
another bid.
We're being asked to endorse here a paper which talks about $670 million over 10 years. Why would we be doing that if the Mayor of the district is accurate in his forecast for his town being a place of boarded up businesses? Who do we believe here? Is it the officials saying, oh, it'll be fine? The Trans-Tasman bubble will come back, we'll have more planes coming out of Auckland? Or do we believe the Mayor of the district? Or is that just Jim being Jim? Saying, help, 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 Mr. Government, we're going to need you to see us through to whenever the tourism bubble comes back and inflates over our town. It's a difficult dilemma for us as decision makers to be in. When we have quite contradictory scenarios about the future of the need for travel around this town, because who's going to need travel if the town is boarded up?
Maybe,
That's my
Gavin,
question.
if you talk about the short-term uncertainties and the long-term projections, I guess, and, make any comment on that.
Yes, Madam Chair. The interventions are staged, and ideally they are implemented as demand increases. What that means is there's a high degree of flexibility. So if actual demand occurs at a slower pace than the assumptions made in the business case, it just means that you defer those decisions. And if you refer to the additional graph we've added to the report, you'll see those step up changes, those stages. So there's a whole series of decisions that get made in the future as you monitor demand, and that gives you the flexibility to advance or defer things according to what actual demand is compared to the scenario on which this is based.
Thank you. I've got a list of people speaking, so I've recorded so far so everyone knows. Councillor Scott, Laws, Forbes, Wilson, and then Calvert. Hobbs, thank you. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, look, building upon the last two discussions, look, my understanding is on page, I don't know what page it is, but there's 3 bullet points, and it reaffirms what Dr. Palmer's been saying, that in the future, 2024, 30, that there will be a detailed business case and subsequent approval processes of council. So in relation to the numbers that Councillor Decker was referring to, that will come to council again. There will be various detail on the potential spends of 131 and 61 million. My understanding in terms of the decision we need to make here today is around the 1.5 million for further investigation. That's the public transport detailed business case, estimated additional total cost. And that's where my question is, Madam Chair, is, are you asking council to basically write a blank cheque? I mean, because I accept, the situation we've got, that, and I think it's, absolutely admirable in terms of what's being tried to do in terms of public transport and walking, reduction of emissions and all these types of things. But, I mean, if you were sitting in our seat, what further information can you provide so that you're reassuring governance that this 1.5 million isn't a blank cheque, it's actually will be an efficient spend and process? And why doesn't it have some more breakdown?
Really good question, and it's endorsing in principle, as it says, and there's 2 different processes, which is 1 now endorsing in principle, and 2 just considering things through an LTP. But Gary,
through you, Madam Chair. So it is a lot of money. I won't deny that it is a lot of money, but it is less than 0.5% of the projected spend to do the public transport delivery over the 10 or so years. It will require a lot of work with respect to governance and working with our partners to make sure that we're delivering what needs to be delivering, if that's what the work shows. That 1.5 million will be spread over 2 years, and 50% of that will be funded by NZTA. So our share is 750k that will be spread over the 2 years, is currently in the draft LTP. So it's not an additional amount of money that we're asking for today. It is worked into the numbers currently.
And it would need to be considered through the LTP process,
Yes.
yeah.
So the detailed business case will get into work around modelling and scheduling of the interventions, but it's also looking at issues around, for example, and this ties in nicely with the decisions around carbon emissions, around vehicle types.
Thank you.
Charging infrastructure, if we're going down to electric vehicles, types of vehicles, potentially an issue around investment in a depot to get that market drive into contesting the next contract rounds in 27 and thereabouts. I might stop there.
But you haven't given us any breakdown. So, how do we know that it's going to be spent efficiently as opposed to a blank cheque?
So, through you, Madam Chair, that's the sort of detail we would bring back. So, if you endorse this, if you include the funding in the long-term plan, and it becomes an activity of council in the first year, we would bring back to you for approval, council, the intended scope of that further business case and those sorts of things, getting approval to release it to the market, and then because of the value, you'd be approving a contract. So there's a number of decision points in there for council in terms of making sure it is providing value for money and is lined up with your expectations as to what it should deliver.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Laws.
Yes, it's an incredibly vexed issue. And private individuals have a nasty habit of not doing what the public sector plans for them to do, which is the nature of the beast, really, for most things local government gets involved in. I just want to pick up on Michael Deaker's point. Is there any sense in deferring? So during the discussions we have on our LTP and the 1.5 you've budgeted for over 2 years, is it? 750k a year. So there might be a potential to say, we'll defer that for another year. What's the view of our partners though? I mean, QLDC, I imagine, would be chomping at the bit, but I'm interested in the Ministry of Transport. Have they committed their funding to this scenario for the similar time period?
Through you, Madam Chair. So we've also preparing our land transport plan to the Transport Agency, and the business case is an initiative or an activity in that. We won't have certainty in terms of the agency investment tool after you've actually adopted your long-term plan. Having said that, while I can't guarantee that you're going to get that money, they are investing 90 million in terms of NZ Up, and that's to build bus lanes along State Highway 6 and 6A. So I would really be surprised if they didn't support investing their share of that business case. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you. Some problems unmuting. Gary, the question I've got for you is how achievable is this, given that we need 40% mode shift by 2028? And I'm talking about your timelines here. We're leaving the delivery of improved services until 2027, which is only leaving 1 year to achieve the mode shift that's targeted and required to stop State Highway 6 becoming a parking lot. Yeah, what do you think about that? Is it, how do you think we can actually achieve those timelines?
Again, through you, Madam Chair. So the report notes are getting 40% mode share, and that's not all public transport, but it's a significant part. Will be challenging. That work starts going forward. One of the other initiatives as part of this is doing work with Waka Kotahi and Queenstown Lakes with respect to travel behaviour change. So we will do our things with services and infrastructure, and that will get a growth in patronage and mode share, but it's the other things that support that, like parking management, both supply and charges, work that's going on around active modes. But yes, 40% will be a challenge, and it'll take a lot of effort.
Yeah, I get a little bit worried about that, given that in this plan, it seems that the least developed part of the plan is the piece around mode shift, including active travel and public transport. It's really undeveloped, and yet it's the most important part at this particular point. And is there a plan to get people working on that really, really fast?
So there's conversation that's happening now with the management team of Way to Go, and if you look at the program of works that's in the documentation we put on your website, you can see there the sequencing and when initiatives like this are meant to happen.
Yeah, I do have some concerns about that, but I'll just note that that's good for the questions. I'll come back with some other thoughts after we've put the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Is that working now?
No.
Now. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Look, I have concerns that Councillor Deaker had about the assumptions that all of this work is about. And it's not that I think Queenstown will be boarded up. I think the demographic will change potentially. And
to the extent that even some hotels may become apartments. I think people will still want to use and be in Queenstown, but it may not be tourists so much. And that actually makes the whole assumptions about the transport quite different and actually more exciting, maybe. The question I have for you is, should we be ensuring, as best we can, because we're only partner of this process, that as they work through the Queenstown business case, that the scenarios and assumptions are tested? So we have a range of scenarios and test assumptions to provide the best planning data. And if so, should we be adding that as a third bullet point to ensure that we've done our role in governance, that we ask you as staff to ensure that we don't go in just saying it's business as usual, maybe 1 or 2 years later, but we're just going back to 2020. Because I know that some of us don't, and sometimes maybe hope that we go back to 2020 because then we may come out better.
So it would be my expectation that you'd have some scenario testing that would be right from it goes back to 2020 through to, it doesn't. And you'd need to use that for your modelling in terms of looking at some of those interventions around when you bring on extra services and who you're catering for.
Yeah. But should we put that as part of the motions just to ensure that we've done our job? And I was going to say something like that we note, given the changes that have occurred because of COVID, that staff will ensure during the QBC process that a scenario of assumptions are tested to provide the best planning data. And then we've been seen to be doing our job, but would that be helpful or unhelpful?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's your call. I've made note of it. But
yeah, okay. Scenario testing probably, well, you've suggested it would just make sense logically as you're doing that process anyway, from a lot of change through to not much change. Okay, sorry, I was just hearing that Councillor Forbes would like to put the existing motion, so I've got that in mind. I did have some other questions though on my list, so that's fine, I've still got them. What are we going to do with Councillor Wilson's suggestion though? No, I leave that till the motion's put. I was just asking whether staff would mind it, given the questions that have been around that. Okay. And I think, you've got a good sense of that. Okay, next person is Councillor Calvert and Councillor Hobbs.
I've got two questions. The first is who would be paying our share of the 1.5 million, or if 1.5 million's at whatever it is? Is it a targeted rate, or is it all of us, or?
Well, those are funding decisions to be made by council during the long-term plan.
What's the
current scenario? Because we'd be putting it in the long-term plan.
It is illegal.
Yeah, apparently it's already in there.
So yes, and so is it? And is it going to? Would it be proposing to be a targeted
something
rate?
Straight into the LTP? There will be two processes. This is in principle.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The principle of it, when we don't know whether it's a targeted rate or not, is as proposed, makes a huge difference if we're consulting. Because if we're consulting people and Queenstown people think everybody in Otago is going to pay their share of this, so it's not much for me, that's one thing. Or if the Queenstown people think, is it that important to us at the moment, it's another thing.
Whatever's fair and appropriate.
So I just can't see how we can divide those two things off as to who.
The Local Government Act does clearly set out that the person that benefits pays, so I guess we would need to assume that that was what was going to happen.
Yeah,
but I hear what you're saying.
Yes, okay. But in which case... I
don't know if that's a question.
In which case, if you're consulting... So I was really...
Madam Chair, council hasn't yet made a decision on the long-term plan. That's obviously working back from June. That's when the decisions get made. All I'm recognising is that you've only been workshopping a number of possibilities and you haven't yet made any sort of decision about how you fund any activity, including this possible one if you endorse this. It's a separate process.
That's good.
And
answer.
My second question is... do it or not do it were the two options. What happened to the option of let's put it in year 3 and 4 of the LTP?
That's a good question.
Because actually at the moment, any business case you try and do based on something that really somewhere between hope and pray and crystal ball gazing is.
Would it be beneficial to delay the project?
Yeah.
Or not?
That's through you, Madam Chair. The reason that it's put at the front end of the long-term plan is really around things that I've touched on, and with respect to if somebody goes down a path, and it may not be us, if somebody goes down a path of having to buy a depot that's set up to that next contract or procure.
What does that mean, darling? Sorry, I didn't understand. Buy a depot.
So the limiting factor to having competition in terms of re-tendering this contract in the future will be a new operator basically has to come in and buy property to set up a depot.
It's a hell of a risk, isn't it?
Yep. And so that's one of the issues that the business case will work through. The other one is around, or another one is around infrastructure in terms of charging for electric buses, type of buses, and the regional or across the country, regional councils doing some work with the NZTA, kind of tussling with the ownership model in terms of a move away from diesel to electric, because as you know, a lot of regional councils are doing their own thing. There's opportunities for synergies there. It gives us more time to plan that stuff rather than.
Well, but it would give us more time to think about how these things interact with it. If you start off with Councillor Deaker's suggestion of which, who knows exactly what Queenstown might look like, and then instead of thinking, well, why don't we wait a couple of years, and when we know more, you say, but a lot of people are going in a particular direction. Well, things like electric cars and other things will become much clearer in 2 years' time too. So I ask again, why, and a depot, I mean, that suggests that there is somebody out there who would like a decision so as they can get a piece of land and build a depot. Well, that is not a good reason for spending $1.5 million now rather than in 2 years' time of our ratepayers' money that I can understand. Is that, have I missed something?
That's a bit rough.
With respect, you can't just go and order a fleet of electric buses and expect them to turn up, the next day. And yes, delaying it by a couple of years still gives some time to get that order in. It's really about, I hear what you're saying in terms of delay, but QLDC has endorsed the business case. Irrespective of what the Mayor has said in the media, they endorsed the business case and he led that conversation.
Yeah, sorry, last year we were thinking that everything was the same. Everything was going to keep going how it was, and we thought that if we did a business case now, it would be 2 years hence before we started doing the things that the demand would be there for. And what I'm saying is there's every reason to believe the demand has been put out 2 years. And if the demand has been put out 2 years and the result of the business case is put out at least 2 years, then why don't we put the business case out 2 years? I'm just sorry, I'm struggling with why that isn't
that's probably a debating point probably of how much appetite you've got for risk in a way. So I don't think there's a correct answer really, but if you have got an answer of some sort, feel free.
Well, probably, Madam Chair, the sooner that more detailed case is prepared, then it will give the greater clarity about what that forward program looks like. And we're already hearing it's a very tight program anyway, so there are real risks in delaying it.
Thank you. Okay, we have Councillor Scott, last questioning. Councillor Hobbs, I've missed you out. Yeah. Yes, Councillor Hobbs is next. Yeah.
Thank you, because it's coming from a different angle altogether. Do you add into the Queenstown business case the demands of the Climate Change Commission rather than just reflect projected traffic congestion? Because all the argument around this table has been about traffic congestion. We have something sitting in the room when I came to an imaginary meeting yesterday, which I thought was on the report of the Climate Change Commission, which is huge. And the sooner, and I will be arguing in the long-term plan tomorrow, the sooner we get on to working out the costs of changes, be it electric buses, be it smaller vehicles, be it whatever, to get the modal change. I want this Queenstown business case not just to be about traffic congestion and meeting the needs of, but about Climate Change Commission. Is that too hard to ask?
Madam Chair, no, it's not. And so if you proceed to leading preparation of that next business case, we would start with the problem definition and restating that, and emissions would become potentially part of that. And as I said, come back to council to make sure that we've got the problem statement and objectives framed right before we do that work. That's the opportunity.
Thanks, Liz.
Okay. Councillor Scott, quick question.
Yeah, if we vote for this here and now, does that tie us into funding it for years 1 and 2 of our LTP? Or in our LTP discussions, can we actually take on board Councillor Calvert's idea of putting it into years 3 and 4? After saying that, I am mindful that we already have a congestion issue, regardless of the tourism situation. I think that's fair, yeah. But nevertheless, this council has been through a prioritisation process, and this isn't at the top of it. And we do have some challenges. So my question is, does it tie into it, or can we, when we look at the LTP tomorrow, actually have that discussion as well?
Other angle of the same question, yep.
Same question, yeah. If you delay that, that will have an impact on the other things.
No, really, that's not the question. My question is, it's a different question, is that if I put my hand up and say we want to endorse in principle this business case, is it committing us to year 1 and 2? So I'm not asking your opinion whether it's a good idea. Or can we still have the flexibility to push it into year 3 and 4 if we're of that mind in our LTP?
Of course, we have to go through a genuine process with the LTP, don't we?
It's not an absolute commitment, but you're sending a very strong signal that this is our intent, this is our direction.
Yeah.
Can I foreshadow I'm going to put it off for 2 years if this one fails? Or
Councillor Malcolm, we've already heard that we can. I'll just go to you.
I'd just like to understand that we're talking $1.5 million shared only between 2 entities. So why isn't the man that says his town is about to get boarded up, why aren't they part of that? I'm just struggling with that. I know they've endorsed it, and I'd endorse anyone spending $1.5 million. I mean, in fact, I know there'll be people in Central Otago would be leaping at $1.5 million shooting rabbits, because that would shoot you over 1 million rabbits at the current contract rate. So why aren't they part of that?
Through you, Madam Chair. So I haven't explored that with QLDC. They have their own. The Queenstown business case has a range of things that are done. A lot of those sitting with QLDC and a lot sitting with the Transport Agency. So they've got costs for that as well. And my apologies, I hadn't split that out in the report. The stuff that we've put up on your website that you can access will actually show how those costs fall across the 3 partners.
Right. Just to me, that this seems to be Queenstown's answer will be in this business case of getting people in and out of Queenstown. So surely that probably goes back to Councillor Calvert's targeted rate and who pays. And I struggle to see them not being a party to that. And it may be on the site where you've explained that.
That's it.
I just sort of struggle with that, really.
Well, through Madam Chair, I think fundamentally public transport is our responsibility. So that's why we lead this particular business case, which is focused very heavily on the public transport elements of the system, in the same way that we led and part funded the Wakatipu ferry business case. Other business cases in this suite are funded by QLDC and or NZTA as appropriate, and we have no funding input to that, although we have an involvement in a kind of input advisory role. So the funding is being shared right across the 3 partners.
Subsequent question. Is there a possibility of using, in a modal change, is there a possibility of using regulatory sanctions to make that happen? I on the North Shore, when you're coming into Auckland, you can't use one particular lane unless you're a bus or got 4 people in your car. So are we looking at
full options.
I know there is only a bus lane, but that doesn't seem to me to be a modal change. People are still sitting in their cars waiting.
I thought it was in.
Yeah, I think
Waiting
that
for a bus. Go on front.
the significant levers are paying, and that's around the parking supply and charging. And buried in the depths of the business case, there's a comment with respect to until QLDC looks at parking at Frankton in particular, it will be challenging for people that live in Lake Hayes Estate and Shotover Country and potentially the new Ladies Mile area for a number of them to hop out of the cars. Some, of course, will, but it's really, you're talking about using the sticks, and we're not talking continuous bus lanes all the way down State Highway 6. They're both lanes that dip in and out, so it makes it challenging to do it like a T3 lane, which is, I think, something that you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Hope, and then we're back to Councillor Forbes' hand up before, I think, on putting the motion. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask a question, which is this: and I could have my orders wrong, but could you receive this report and then could you let it lie on the table till you've had the LTP discussion tomorrow? Is that possible? Because we're not ignoring it. We know there's some depth here between the different years, but could that be one way around it and then come back to this? We haven't said no, but then we've had a good discussion on it. Maybe one way? Not too tricky.
I mean, anything's possible, I suppose. It's just up to us to consider what's the most sensible. We have had some other themes that have come through committees for discussion ahead of LTP discussions, and yeah, I think it's appropriate that we're giving some steer. We could delay it, I guess, but I'm not sure myself personally the benefit of doing that. Councillor, no.
Well, I think we've got, on the 24th of February, we've got Finance Committee, which essentially will be adopting a draft LTP annual plan. So I imagine that's the decision time to make any tweaks. It's a workshop that's being dealt with like tomorrow, so that won't be an opportunity to make decisions. But I'm sure that through the Finance Committee, if there's a will to make changes at that point, that would be where it would be done.
Madam Chair, I worry about that, in that we've also got a partner who is considering their funding portion as well, and if we give any message out that we are in jitters over whether we might not fund ours, that may affect their decision as well. So I would have thought this committee should be giving a clear indication as to whether it supports or not supports, and that would then help their decision.
Well, I guess that's for all of us to weigh up, and that's our job as governors. So that will be what we do next. Councillor Forbes, are you ready to move the motion? Is that what you were signalling? Do we have? And it's sorry. Do you want to?
Yes, please.
It's the current motion.
The current
is that
motion,
right?
Yeah.
Seconded, Councillor Hobbs. Yep. And you may speak.
I have a real problem with putting this off over any time. We're being asked to develop, to receive a business case, endorse it in principle for the basis of more detailed investigations. It's already been accepted by QLDC, and I'm not sure who made the point, but I totally endorse it, that there's two other partners involved here, one of which has already endorsed it and the other one that's about to. And all of them have been involved in the whole putting together of this over several years. It's been a long-term project. I have a real problem with us referring to, in any major way, to quoted comments from the Mayor without considering the data, the long-term data that he's working from. We've got no idea what that is. We've read something in the paper. We don't know what context it's in. There's nothing evidence-based that is sitting on. And what we do know is that this business case is based over time of many, many years of data from Stats NZ, 40 years of data, I believe, if I go back to the beginning of its creation when I was on the old council. And they paint a picture that's been built from those stats and long-term data from NZTA as well. If we don't get on with this, and if we stall and cause it to stall, we miss the opportunity yet again and fail to stay ahead of infrastructure demand. If Queenstown takes 2 years to bounce back, so what? We'll then be ready. We don't have to stall it. We can be ready, and instead of coming to a standstill first, which is so often what we do with infrastructure planning, is to come to a standstill and then get caught scrabbling about and trying to act a bit too late. Let's not do that. The other comment that I would make, that I think gives weight to this business case, is that this was mostly written prior to the Climate Commission's 15-year blueprint. And yet, if you have a good look at the transport sector and it's chapter 4B and then the tailwinds and headwinds of chapter 18, you'll see that the team that's put this together have been prescient really, and they've delivered something that pretty much falls right into the early recommendations of that blueprint. And I just think it's well constructed, it's put together over a long period of time. And the GFC, everybody thought Queenstown was going to board up to. I just would like to remind us of that. And we got very behind in our infrastructure at that point because we didn't act. Let's not do that again. That's all I'd like to say. And I totally support this and would like us to endorse it in principle as it's asked. Thanks.
Thank you. Did you want to speak as seconder?
Very briefly. If this had been before I had read the Climate Change Commission, I might not necessarily be endorsing it. But because of what the Climate Change Commission is asking us to do, I'm jealous of the position that Queenstown is in. They're already planning. God alone, we've got to do this in Dunedin, and they're ahead of the game. Let us send a signal that we're taking the Climate Change Commission seriously by endorsing this.
Councillor Wilson.
I'm happy. I understand both the wins and losers on the side. What I'm concerned about is this motion doesn't give an opportunity for people to understand that it is tied to the long-term plan process and it will be subject to that. And I think we should expressly put that, because it may well be that Waka Katoa doesn't put money in this time. So I would prefer, and I'm happy to move an amendment accordingly, that we endorse, subject to the long-term plan consultation process, in principle, the Queenstown business case, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, it should be the subject to should be after the word in principle, I think. But in that way, people can actually have some input into it through the long-term plan process. We'll be better advanced understanding where Waka Katoa is. We'll also, we've got some hard decisions to make. I absolutely appreciate this as an opportunity with the Climate Commission work. I also don't want us to be putting in bus lanes when actually what may happen is that there's going to be far fewer cars anyway and they're not needed. So I think that will give us some steer from the community, and while it's great to have people around this table saying what the community wants, I think we should be making it very clear we want to hear from the community during the long-term plan about this issue. It is a lot of money.
Okay, a seconder for the amendment then. Is that what your hand's up for, Councillor
I'll second the amendment.
Yeah, and then you would like to speak as well. Okay. Yep.
I'd like us to think about it in the long-term plan process, because I think there's a reasonable argument to have it put off for 2 years, because the demand for it is, the whole thing is being put into the future, the demand probably. But on top of that, we've got tenants in Queenstown who are still seriously suffering and not able to pay their rent. And we're suggesting that they might be desperately, urgently wanting to pay more rates for the purposes of more congestion that they don't currently have, and they'd like to have more congestion right at the moment, some of them, because that would show that there was people in Queenstown. At the moment, there's not enough people in Queenstown for the congestion they would like to have. If only they had the problem that we're trying to solve at the moment, the people I hear from would be pleased. So I would like to hear, particularly through the long-term plan process, from Queenstown ratepayers that they want to pay higher rates
for this as a priority at this time, because what I am hearing is that they don't even want to pay their rent, let alone pay the rates that they were paying before, let alone pay increased rates. And there's good reasons for that, and they're connected to the amount of people moving around Queenstown at the moment. So that's why I like the amendment, and I would just like to hear from the people. If Queenstown people are optimistic and loving the idea of increasing their rates to do that particular process, then so be it. And that would be good to hear from them in the long-term plan process.
Anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Hope?
I agree with you, Councillor Calvert, and I would be more happy just to actually vote in favour of this, whereas before I was not probably that happy, but this gives me more reassurance that we are asking people with their rate money what we're going to do with it. So yes, I will support it.
If Councillor Forbes and Councillor Hubbs are happy with the amendment, we can do it that way.
No, I'm not.
Right, so we do the original.
So we do the original.
Yeah.
I'm unhappy too. I will live with it if I absolutely have to,
Already
but
got the story done.
unhappy.
Unhappy with it or happy with it?
Yeah, I'll live with it if I have to, but I just cannot see what that does. It's already in the long-term plan consultation process. I can't see what we're trying to add there. It's all we're trying to do is to endorse it for detailed investigation. All of the funding comes later. I don't see why we're doing that as well. If we have to ask the question and put it in our already very crowded area, I will live with it, but not happy.
Okay, so the question is then, if you were happy with the amendment, then we could do it that way if you wanted to change it. Otherwise, I'm going to take your original motions first, because that's Liz describes as the correct process.
Take the amendment first.
Yeah. That's not changing the motion.
Take the amendment first.
The amendment to the motion.
Okay. Different from
And who's
how I was advised, but that's okay. Yep.
Councillor Calvert.
Count the amendment first then, okay? Which is up there now, and you're doing both 1 and 2 as the, or
Just
two.
Yep, just adding, we're voting on adding the words to the, so this, I'm just going to hold that separately.
Subject to the long-term plan consultation process. Yep, okay. All in favour with that amendment?
Aye.
Against?
I mean, whatever it is, no.
So I think Alexa put her hand up to that.
I am against it. Yeah, right.
Okay, so it is carried then. Next, then we put both of them. That was
the amendment
just
becomes the motion.
The amendment becomes the motion.
Yeah.
So now we need, Councillor Hubbs voted against.
So I need another second.
So we need another second.
Although I'll
that's what I
probably
mean.
vote for the
We're
motion.
putting 1 and 2 with the amendment becoming the motion. Yep. That's already done. So we're doing that. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. And that brings this meeting to a close. Thank you very much to everyone for their patience and their contributions.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated.